I was shutting down my workstation when I heard the cough. Not the kind that means someone's sick, the kind that says someone wants your attention without earning it. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The only person who still wore leather-soled shoes on our floor was Corwin Dresner. "Got a minute, Sienna?" he asked, already knowing the answer. It was 6:42 p.m. on a Friday. My bag was zipped, my desk locked, and I was halfway into my coat. I glanced up. His blazer was unbuttoned, his posture relaxed. All of it a little too staged. "We need coverage this weekend," he said. "Nothing urgent, just want to make sure the push goes smoothly." Monday's highly visible. There it was. The faux casual tone, the manufactured pause where a question should have been. But it wasn't a question. Not really. "I'm not on call," I said evenly. "I know," he replied. "It's more of a team effort situation. No emergency. Just alignment." "No," I said. He blinked once, not confused, annoyed. Like a vending machine that didn't dispense. "Excuse me," I didn't repeat myself to be rude. I repeated myself to be clear. "No." I watched something flicker in his eyes. He tilted his head, then smiled. Tight, practiced executive. "Thanks for the clarity." Then he turned and walked off, whistling some unidentifiable tune like this was all perfectly normal. I stood still, coat half on, watching his back retreat down the hallway. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. I'd seen that kind of smile before. It's the one they wear right before they remove something quietly. I didn't panic. I didn't second-guess myself. The request wasn't contractual. There was no system outage. The sprint had already closed clean. I'd met my hours, exceeded them if we were counting the week I picked up Elsner's shift while he was out sick, and Corwin didn't even send a thank you. That weekend, I walked, slept in, made bread, cleaned the baseboards. My version of therapy. My version of sharpening the blade. I didn't log in. I didn't check alerts. But I did open an old notebook. The one with the protocols no one else knew about. The ones I had written not to crash the system, but to make sure it knew what to do in case someone like me disappeared. The badge reader blinked red. I tried again, slower this time, pressing it flat against the glass. Another flash, access denied. No click, no beep, just silence. I stepped back from the turnstile and looked around. A few others were arriving, scanning in, coffee in hand, half awake. No one noticed me. No one needed to. That was the point. I pulled out my phone and opened Slack. It spun once, then failed. Unknown user. I checked my email server, connection lost. I wasn't locked out. I was gone. No warning, no offboarding, just deletion. I didn't try a third time. Instead, I crossed the street to the corner cafe and found my usual table near the window. The one where I used to sit when I worked through lunch thinking through architecture problems no one else seemed to want to understand. I ordered a cup of unsweetened tea, no lemon, and sat down. Across the street, the office building stood still, blue glass windows catching the light. I watched the fourth floor come to life, monitors flickering on people trickling in, chairs rolling back. The systems I built were waking up too. But this time, they were missing something. Me. I didn't smile. I didn't reach for revenge. I reached for alignment. Because months ago, I had seen it coming, not the moment, but the tendency. The way leadership whispered gratitude while planning around your absence. The way your name could vanish from agendas before anyone had the courage to tell you why. That weekend, I didn't write code. I didn't touch production. But I had already prepared. Quietly, without alert, I had designed a branch in the infrastructure logic, one that watched for my disappearance. One that did nothing. Until it had to. As I sipped my tea, I opened a secure relay window on my phone. The command line blinked back. Still live. Still listening. Not to me, but for me. And just before 8:03 a.m., a minor delay pulsed through the reporting dashboard. A fetch call that stalled just slightly longer than usual. Not broken, not loud, just asking a question. I wrote it on a Wednesday night long after the office lights had gone dim and the main Slack channels had gone quiet. The hallway was silent except for the hum of cooling fans and the occasional cough from the janitor who never asked questions. I stayed late that evening, not out of obligation, but calculation. It was after they'd passed me over again. Third time. Third excuse. This one wrapped in glossy words like visibility and executive fit. Words that meant nothing when every successful deployment still carried my fingerprint. I didn't rage. I didn't argue. I just opened a terminal and typed a single line into the core automation loop. If origin signature removed, an exit flag not set, halt, all is, execution await signal. It was a condition, not a threat. Not code meant to destroy, but to pause to listen. It wouldn't trigger on error or fail loudly. It would wait. Because I knew this company. I knew people like Corwin. And I knew they didn't fire people like me with words. They just stopped inviting us. I folded that line into a rarely used subroutine, something no one looked at unless something truly catastrophic happened. And no one expected catastrophe. That was the beauty of my system. It always ran clean. It had never failed. Because I had never let it. That line was never documented. No one reviewed it during code audits. I called it Condition Delta, just obscure enough to pass without question, just essential enough to be buried in every deployment path. It didn't do anything until it had to. And now, as I watched the building from across the street, tea cooling beside me, I knew it had woken up. Not with noise, not with sparks, with stillness. A delay here, a skipped ping there. The heartbeat of the system was hesitating, not broken, not down. Just looking for someone who was no longer listed in the directory. At 8:03, the first delay appeared just long enough to be mistaken for network jitter. Reporting dashboards hung for a second too long before refreshing. An analyst refreshed her browser, muttered something about the Wi-Fi, and moved on. No red flags, no alerts. Just a heartbeat that hesitated. At 8:07, the email sync faltered. Not failed, paused. Incoming threads stacked up in limbo, time-stamped but unread. The system showed all green lights. Internal monitors glowed steady. Even the incident dashboard, the one I built to detect silent outages, looked serene. Because technically nothing had crashed. That was the point. At 8:15, payment disbursements initiated as scheduled. The finance team clicked Approve All. The screen blinked Confirmed Logged. But behind the interface, the instruction hung mid-flight, waiting for validation from a source that no longer existed. Somewhere on the third floor, Romir Zayed leaned back from his screen. He was new, 6 months and fresh from a boot camp, still optimistic. He ran a test against the logs, then checked the timestamps. He didn't know what he was seeing, only that something felt off. He posted a quiet question in the Nandra Dev Sandbox thread. Anyone seeing weird lag on scheduled jobs? Looks clean, but the interval drifts increasing. No one answered. The usual suspects were knee-deep in morning stand-ups or combing through pull requests. A few senior devs had already hit the caffeine point where every anomaly was blamed on caching. One replied with a shrug emoji and a joke about the intern servers. Romir didn't push. He returned to his code, eyes lingering on the job queue for another few seconds before moving on. He wouldn't know until later that what he saw was the first visible ripple. Across the street, I watched the reflection of the fourth floor flicker faintly in the cafe window. Nothing explosive, nothing loud, just a rhythm breaking beneath the noise. The system was waiting, and beneath the illusion of green, it had already begun to whisper. The vault had no name in the system, just a trailing string of characters embedded in a permissioned script no one ever reviewed. It didn't respond to triggers like other logs. It didn't announce itself. It simply watched. I built it during a long winter stretch sometime between the second missed promotion and the silent rewrite of a framework I authored. Not out of spite, but out of pattern recognition. I'd seen how truth got erased. Not suddenly, but gradually. First they forget your name in meetings. Then they rewrite your code. Then they remember the feature, but never who built it. So I left behind a recorder, not for revenge, for alignment. At 8:19 a.m., the first manual override was entered. Someone disabled the security handshake between two modules in order to push a hotfix that wasn't validated. The system showed success. The vault wrote it down. At 8:24, another senior dev skipped rollback protocol to force a clean build through staging. It failed quietly. The system blinked green. The vault tagged the timestamp. The illusion held because the metrics did. CPU usage was fine. Load balancers looked smooth. Everything seemed operational until someone looked deeper. But no one had time for depth on a Monday morning. Every resolved status on Jira. Every Slack thread closed with fixed indev. Every commit labeled urgent patch without peer review. The vault saw it all. It didn't shout. It stored. By 8:30, 6 manual interventions had bypassed every safeguard I had built. But the vault wasn't designed to stop them. Only to remember. I sipped the last of my tea, now lukewarm, and leaned back against the worn bench cushion. I wasn't watching them fix the system. I was watching them try to fake a recovery into a machine that no longer trusted them. And somewhere inside a quiet server rack 3 floors above the system was beginning to ask its own questions. By 9:15, Corwin had assembled his narrative, the kind designed for a room that didn't read too closely, simple, clean, confident. He labeled it a brief credential caching issue, added that it had been identified and contained within the first 30 minutes, and repeated the phrase, "no client impact," enough times to bake it into the room's expectations. The boardroom was quiet, temperature-controlled, and soundproofed. Behind its glass walls, executives sat with tablets open and expressions fixed somewhere between boredom and fragile assurance. Corwin stood near the screen jacket, off sleeves rolled. To just the right place, voice calm. He walked them through the timeline. 8:03 detect, 8:07 respond. 8:32 validate, 9:00 resume. Smooth green arrows, neat blocks of text. I could picture it perfectly from my cafe chair. He made it look like the team had sprung into action coordinated under his guidance and brought the system back online with practiced efficiency. I knew that tone. It was the same one he used when he repeated my architecture notes, as if they were his thoughts. But Jared Linwood didn't nod. He leaned forward slightly, fingers steepled, and asked, "Can we see the raw logs from the 8-hour cycle?" Corwin hesitated, smiled thinly. "We archived those during the resolution window. I'll follow up with infrastructure." Jared nodded slowly. Then came Susan Helvig, who rarely spoke unless it mattered. Were the validation steps performed in the actual release pipeline or a mirrored environment? Corwin's face twitched. "The environments are functionally identical, but they're not the same," she replied, not raising her voice. He pressed on to the next slide, voice steady, but the room had shifted. What began as a recap was now a test. Every detail under the microscope. Every answer trailing too many qualifiers. They were listening now not to what was said but what was missing. And somewhere in the background the vault was listening too. At 12:04 p.m. it appeared. No header in all caps. No red banner. Just a clean post on the internal announcement board, sandwiched between a lunch delivery reminder and a Slack security update. The title read Postmortem Observations from a Parallel Archive. It wasn't flagged urgent. It didn't have to be. Inside was a single link. Nothing external, nothing flashy. Just a quiet redirect to an internal dashboard every employee recognized. Same layout, same color palette, same data format. Only this one wasn't pulling from the live simulation. It was pulling from the vault. On the left, Corwin's polished timeline. 8:03 detect. 8:07 respond. 8:32 validate. 9:00 resume. On the right, the system's actual logs. 8:03 stalled fetch attempt, no response. 8:07 manual override, logged by archaic without rollback auth. 8:24 failed push to staging, marked resolved with no build validation. 8:32 second override duplicate key, submitted by P. Dressner. No accusations, just facts side by side, each with timestamps. Each entry hyperlinked to source, commits chat threads, and screenshots from active dashboards. No context required, just contrast. By 12:06, a junior engineer named Marissa clicked. By 12:09, someone in compliance did. At 12:13, the board shared it with legal. By 12:19, the view count passed 40. There were no alarms, no meetings canceled. Just a subtle shift in energy keycards. Tapping, slower elevator chatter replaced with silence. People reading, rereading, realizing the logs had been watching while they looked away. Corwin hadn't mentioned the vault. He hadn't known to. I hadn't sent it either. The vault was designed to post its own report after observing 12 consecutive misalignments between system status and input behavior. It followed protocol, just like everything else I'd written. From across the street, I watched as people leaned back from their desks, some confused, others stunned. A few closed the tab and said nothing. But most didn't look away, and in the corner of the dashboard, one line quietly updated in real-time integrity delta, confirmed. By early afternoon, the silence had shape. Corwin was still replying to threads, still using his usual tone, crisp, authoritative, full of unnecessary adverbs. But the responses had thinned. People stopped tagging him in deployment threads. No one replied to his moving forward summary. A few left his comments unread. Most didn't even open them. He tried to seize control again at 1:15, sending a brief, "Appreciate everyone's agility today. Solid recovery under pressure." But by then the link had already passed through every department. No one argued. No one congratulated. Just a quiet flood of unread acknowledgments. At 1:46, he entered the boardroom with his folder and the same timeline slides from that morning. Jared Linwood was seated at the head of the table, his notebook closed, pen balanced carefully between his fingers. Susan Helvig sat just left of center beside a quiet legal observer who said nothing but wrote constantly. "We've resolved the issue," Corwin began. "All systems are currently stable. We believe the post-mortem log circulating this afternoon reflects an internal archive not meant for distribution." No one nodded. Jared's voice came low, even. "Have you reviewed the vault?" Corwin paused. The silence that followed wasn't confusion, it was recognition. "I've read the documents," he said finally. "I'm aware of the discrepancies. Some log data may have been misinterpreted. The response protocols were adjusted under pressure." Susan didn't blink. "Do you deny submitting the override at 8:32? "I don't recall the exact time," Corwin said, "but I was present for the coordination effort." "And the credential string?" Jared asked. "It was temporary, a stopgap." They let him finish. No raised voices, no accusations, just stillness. And when Jared closed his notebook, Corwin took that as his cue. He stood, nodded one's habit more than confidence, and left the room with the same stiff poise he entered with. But when that door closed behind him, it wasn't just a meeting he'd walked out of. It was a structure that no longer routed through his name. And at 2:17, the invitation appeared in my inbox. 4 names, 1 subject: strategic realignment. Closed session. At 2:17 p.m., it arrived, no fanfare, no blinking red flags. Just a private calendar invite tucked into my inbox, quietly labeled Strategic Realignment Closed Session. 4 participants: Jared Linwood, Susan Helvig, Linda Haskins from Legal, and me. I joined without video, without initials. No name on the black square. Just presence. Jared spoke first, his voice even. "We're not asking you to come back," he said. "We're asking if you'll consider building forward with us." Susan added, "You understand the system better than anyone. Not just how it runs, but how it fractures without ownership." Linda's tone was clinical, but not cold. "This is not a rehiring discussion. This is a licensing conversation." I said nothing for a long moment. I wanted them to feel what I had felt, being removed without warning, without noise. Let them wait in it. Then I spoke. "First, Corwin Dressner's name doesn't appear on anything I touch. Not in commit logs, not in archived docs, not in user permissions. You want a new system. Then it starts without his shadow." Jared nodded once. "Done." "Second, no one who stayed silent while I was erased works beside me now. They can keep their roles, their titles, but not within the scope of my design." Susan didn't hesitate. Understood. "Third, I don't rebuild what failed. I build what replaces it. My architecture from zero. You don't own it, you lease it. I hold the keys. I named the environment. Full discretion. Linda took that down without blinking. Jared leaned back in his chair, hands folded. Accepted. There was no need to negotiate. They had already calculated what it would cost to do it without me, and what it had already cost pretending they could. The meeting ended without small talk. No thank yous. Just an abrupt disconnect like a circuit flipped. 3 hours later, a courier knocked once and handed me a small, unbranded box. Inside, a new laptop sealed. And a handwritten note on clean cardstock. You're live. Build it your way. I powered it on, opened the terminal, and let the blank screen breathe in the quiet. Then I began typing the first line, something new, something mine. The machine purred softly as it powered on new silicon, untouched waiting. No corporate watermark, no provisioning script. Just an open terminal blinking in clean rhythm. I sat with it for a moment, hands still. No distractions, no noise. Just the hum of the city outside and the soft tick of time moving forward without asking permission. Then I placed my fingers on the keys. I didn't reach for old code. I didn't pull a repo or fork a base. I started from zero, not because I had to, but because I finally could. The first line I typed wasn't a function. It wasn't even executable. It was a declaration. Environment no access without authorship. That was its name, not an acronym, not a brand, a principle. I had spent years watching people overwrite names, scrub contributors build empires on undocumented labor. Now I wasn't here to be thanked. I was here to be exact. I began to define the framework clean access control. Traceable edits, no silent pushes. Every module would log the name of its author. Every deployment would echo ownership back to the one who wrote it. Not to punish mistakes, but to ensure memory. To keep truth from dissolving in chain of command fog. By the third hour, the skeleton was taking shape, modular, elegant, lean. I knew what the company needed. I also knew what it tried to fake. And now I was designing the difference. There was no audience, no applause. Just the quiet shift of something aligning again. Something settling back into place the way it was always meant to. I didn't need Corwin's approval. I didn't need his silence. What I needed was already here: autonomy, clarity, and the blank space to build with no one watching over my shoulder. Because now they were watching their own. I typed the last line of the night, saved the file, and shut the terminal. No celebration. No anger. Just the simple, steady truth that if they ever tried to erase me again, they'd find the system refusing to comply.